All right. Video 2. My hair doesn't look any better. I didn't do quite as good a job on it last night. We're calling it Tom Bukovac hair. I think that his hair's always messed up because he's always wearing those headphones on his head or something. I'm not sure. But it's okay. It's entertaining, you know. If you're not careful, you could learn something. So, another thing that I think is probably good to talk about is the organization of this machine string to string, right? So if let's say, for instance, I start here at A, at my 5th fret. You see there's a dot here at the 5th fret. It's a dot at 3 and 5 and 7 and 9 and 12. And then I call this octave 3. This is octave 3, right? You could call it 15, right? 15 and 17 and 19 and 21. But I like octave 3, octave 5, octave 7, octave 9. Because it's just easier. Because it's the same thing as these down here. It's just an octave higher. So if I start here at this A note at the 5th fret, a lot of people will go out there and they'll learn these power chords, right? So like maybe you can take a root in a 5th, you know, and they call that a 5th because if you come up the scale, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you've got 1 here and you're 5 away from it in a major scale, you got this thing called a perfect 5th. Now, rock and roll guys call this form 1, and I would agree because I have been a rock and roll guy on occasion. People want to throw money at you and they say, hey, we've got some money. We want to throw it at you. Will you play rock and roll? And I was, of course, I'm not going to say, well, no, why would I want your money? So, but a rock and roll guy might go, you know, it's like that old joke that you keep seeing over and over again. It's like jazz guys play 6,000 chords for 6 people and rock guys play 3, not even 6, right? They'll play 3 chords. Folk guys might play 6, right? So your rock guys play 3 chords for 6,000, and the folk guy plays 6 chords for 200. I don't know what they play for. So you get the idea, though. The idea here is that I'm saying there's a root on the 6th string, and that if I come across, my form 2 becomes a root on the 5th string. And if I come across, I get a root on the 4th string. So right away I get A in this position, right? A, D, G. And it's handy because you got power chords. And if you're not careful, you could drop you could put that 2nd finger on down there on the bottom if you like that fingering, you know, and you could bar across at the top, and then you get this big inverted major chord, right? And you could do this here, and you could fatten up the bottom by playing both. And then, of course, you got your granddad's bar chord. And that's a good way to look at it, because if you were in D, right, you'd have 1, 4, and 5 all right in a row. Now, the other way to look at it, I think it comes from, I don't know where it comes from. I think it comes from tenor guitar, but I was taught many moons ago, I was taught that if a chord had a root on the 1st string, it was a form 1. Well, that kind of holds true in the rock and roll case, right? They say, hey, you want to be a jazz guy and play, 600 chords for 6 people? Or whatever the joke may be this week. Then you need to know your roots from the 1st and the 2nd and the 3rd string down, right? Because, you get into these chord melody things, right? And all of a sudden you're playing these inverted monstrosities that may or may not have a root in them, right? So Well, at least not where you would expect if you're always expecting the root to be on 1 or 5 or 4. And most guys are, just expecting roots on 1 and 5, from what I've seen. It's like they have to be really advanced to understand that, right? Ooh, oh my God, you could get away with a second on, right? If I got a G chord and I'm putting the second note in it, it's a second, right? So, minor, second, minor third, major third. Oh, those things are right next to each other, almost like that. Oh, it's that stupid monkey in the middle of the E string, right? When I'm in a G chord, the monkey becomes a minor third interval, so it makes the minorness of that G happen. And if I raise it to that half step above, it's major. And if I get a half step below, it's a second. Right? So there's a little bit from our earlier exercise, right? You know how the meaning comes into words later on after you start to understand how things work, but you can't get it right away. So form 1 is now the same as your granddad's bar chord form 1, right? Because there is a root on the 6th string and the 1st string. Now, if you're not careful, you'll figure out that there's one on the 4th string, but let's not confuse matters. And then if I take a form 2, then I end up with a thing that looks like this, or like this, right? Now, what do they share in common? They kind of share this, what your cage system guys call your D grip. You got your D grip like down here, and if you move that D grip from there up to 5, right, then you get an F chord, but you could put the F and the A below it and get it here, or you could get the F down here. See, so there's 2 ways to do that thing. So this is form 3, if we call it, I don't know if there's even a name for it, a rock and roll system. But it's an alternate form 2 from, I don't know if we can call it a jazz guy system. I don't know what it is, maybe a tenor guitar system. But what they share in common is that cage system D grip. And it's like in the middle. So you've got a root below, or you get the root above, right? Like that. In relation on the neck. The pitches are both below, right? And then we get our form 3, which puts a root on the 3rd string. Now, in this case, if you're not careful, you'll figure out that that's your granddad's open G chord down here, right? Because you get these 4, 3, and 2 are open. And so if I put roots below, but on the high side of the neck, or I get roots below on the low side of the neck. So here's your rock and roll guy form 2. Here's your jazz guy form 3. Form 2, yeah. But I call it form 3 because it's got a root on the 3rd string, right? And then if I do this, and I want it to be in context of C, right? The C's inside of the chord, right? But at the same time, this could be an A, right? It could be a C. You can get away with a lot of things under that if you're not careful. So it's just 2 ways to look at the same thing. An E chord is form 1 because there's a root on the 6th and on the 1st. A C chord is form 2 because there's a root on the 2nd string. And you can't see that because the nut is playing these other 2 things that would make it look like a D grip. So I got to slide it up at least a half step to get to a D flat, or up a whole step to get to this D, which then allows you to play the form 3 rock and roll style grip of D, right? And then I get to my form 3, which could be a G chord or could be an A chord if you're not careful. So try to make sense of that. Good luck.